November 8, 1942, Sidi Farouk Beach, Algeria. Before dawn, the dark Mediterranean surf heaves against the steel hulls of American landing craft. Inside, U.S. infantrymen crouch in silence, gripping rifles slick with salt spray. Among the stacked supplies are wooden crates, stamped "Secret" their contents, known only to a few officers. When the ramps drop and boots splash ashore, the crates are pried open to reveal something astonishing: a 54-inch steel tube, light enough to rest on one shoulder, carrying a warhead capable of piercing the thick armor of a panzer tank. It is the M1 bazooka, a $25 invention that will change the battlefield overnight. As the first waves move inland, enemy armored cars rumble out from hidden positions, expecting helpless riflemen. Instead, small two-man teams kneel in the sand, connect wires, and fire a rocket that trails a sudden white flame. The shaped charge warhead slams into steel, exploding with a flash that turns the vehicle into twisted wreckage. In the first hours of Operation Torch, the bazooka silences machine gun nests, cracks bunkers, and halts armor that once dictated every move of the infantry. What began as a secret experiment now proves itself in live combat, setting the stage for a revolution in how wars will be fought. In the early 1940s, tanks ruled the battlefield. German panzer divisions swept across Europe with near impunity. Their thick armor and powerful cannons crushed defenses, while supporting infantry cleared resistance. Ordinary riflemen, even with grenades or small-caliber anti-tank rifles, stood little chance. The Allies' best countermeasure was the heavy, crew-served anti-tank gun, accurate but cumbersome. It required multiple men, a towing vehicle, and valuable setup time. In the chaos of a fast-moving battle, these guns often arrived too late or were easily outflanked. Soldiers on foot were left dangerously exposed when enemy armor broke through. Commanders faced a critical question: how could a single squad defend itself without heavy artillery? The answer would not come from building bigger cannons, but from rethinking the very concept of anti-tank warfare. What if one soldier, hidden behind a wall or crouched in a foxhole, could stop a tank alone? The U.S. Army Ordnance Department began searching for a lightweight, inexpensive weapon that could be mass-produced and carried into combat with ease. The solution would be radical: a shoulder-fired rocket launcher using a shaped charge warhead. Simple to build, quick to train, and devastatingly effective, it would give infantrymen the power to turn every hedgerow, city street, and mountain pass into a potential ambush site. That vision set the stage for the bazooka's creation. The bazooka did not appear from nowhere. Its story begins in workshops, proving grounds, and the minds of ordnance engineers who refused to accept that only heavy, crew-served guns could beat tanks. In early 1942, engineers at the U.S. Ordnance Corps were experimenting with rockets, motor fuels, and a warhead concept borrowed from explosives research: the shaped charge. An explosive cone that, when detonated, focused energy into a tiny, molten jet capable of punching through steel. Two names stand out in those hurried months: Colonel Leslie Skinner and Lieutenant Edward Uhl. Working with limited parts and a tight timetable, they cobbled prototypes from steel tubing, wiring, and surplus rocket motors. On May 6, 1942, at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, a hastily assembled launcher was fired in front of skeptical ordnance officers. The demonstration was crude but decisive. The shaped charge projectile penetrated armor in ways chemical and mechanical theory had predicted. And the concept passed from lab curiosity to a weapon the Army would order into production. Soldiers gave it a nickname almost at once. The launcher's long, thin shape reminded troops of a novelty instrument popularized by comedian-musician Bob Burns, the bazooka, and the name stuck. What had started as an improvised experiment became the M1 rocket launcher, a design rushed into manufacturing. Factories were retooled, parts standardized, and training programs created so that within months, thousands of these $25 tubes could be shipped to units bound for combat. Simple, cheap, and surprisingly effective, the bazooka moved from prototype benches to the hands of frontline infantry at a wartime speed few inventions ever matched. At first glance, the bazooka looks almost laughably simple: a hollow steel tube, a couple of wires, and a stick-like rocket. But under that simplicity lies a clever marriage of chemistry and geometry that made it deadly. The launcher itself was nothing more than a smooth-bore tube roughly 4.5 feet long, fitted with a shoulder rest and basic iron sights. A two-man team was the norm. One man aimed and fired, the other carried spare rockets and helped reload. The rocket was a compact assembly, a small solid-fuel motor in the rear, stabilizing fins, and a warhead up front containing a shaped charge, a conical cavity lined with metal. On impact, the explosive collapsed the cone inward and formed a slender, high-velocity jet of molten metal. That jet didn't rely on blunt force. It focused explosive energy into a tiny point, allowing it to pierce armor several inches thick despite the warhead's modest size. Firing was electrical. The operator attached 2 contact wires to the launcher, looked through the simple sights, and pressed the trigger. The rocket left the tube with little felt recoil. The motor burned behind the warhead, so the launcher stayed manageable, but the backblast was violent and unmistakable, a flash and rush of hot gas that could expose the firer's position or ignite dry cover. Effective ranges were short by modern standards. Accurate first-shot hits were typically inside 100 yards and best under 50-75 yards for moving targets. Against thin-skinned vehicles, bunkers, and side armor, the bazooka was devastating. Against heavily sloped or very thick frontal armor, it could struggle. Because success depended on getting close and aiming precisely, training and teamwork mattered as much as the hardware. The bazooka turned the job of stopping a tank from a crew-served operation into a tense, often personal duel. One soldier's nerve and skill versus tons of steel. Combat is the ultimate testing ground, and the bazooka's first months in action revealed both its strengths and its flaws. In the deserts of North Africa and the rugged hills of Sicily, American squads quickly discovered that firing a rocket from cover was far trickier than in a training field. The weapon's fierce backblast kicked up dust, gave away positions, and could even scorch a wall or shrub behind the operator. Soldiers learned to clear a safe zone behind the tube and to choose firing spots where the backflash would not betray them. The weather also played a role. In cold, damp conditions, the early M1's battery-powered ignition sometimes failed, leaving a soldier exposed with a dud round. Crews improvised, keeping batteries warm inside their jackets and checking contacts obsessively. Despite these headaches, confidence grew. Troops realized that a well-placed bazooka shot could immobilize or destroy a tank, crack open a concrete pillbox, or collapse a machine gun nest with a single hit. Tactics evolved almost overnight. Infantry squads began assigning dedicated 2-man bazooka teams. One soldier aimed and fired. The other carried extra rockets, spotted targets, and provided covering fire. They learned to stalk armored vehicles through alleys and hedgerows, striking from close range before vanishing into smoke and rubble. Some units used coordinated crossfires, luring tanks into kill zones where multiple bazookas could engage simultaneously. Each successful engagement taught fresh lessons. Soldiers became experts in judging distance, angling shots for weak side or rear armor, and working with riflemen and machine gunners to pin enemy crews. What had begun as a new gadget rapidly became a core part of small unit doctrine. By late 1943, any well-trained U.S. infantry platoon could field several bazooka teams capable of ambushing tanks and fortified positions with deadly confidence. The bazooka's reputation was forged in the chaos of countless skirmishes, where individual courage and quick thinking turned theory into battlefield reality. In Sicily's narrow streets, Sergeant William Edge and his loader crawled through shell-blasted rubble to ambush a Panzer IV that was hammering their platoon. Waiting until the tank's turret swung away, they rose, fired from barely 30 yards, and vanished into smoke as the vehicle erupted in flames. Months later, in the hedgerows of Normandy, Corporal James Bowles and Private Henry Crandall used a single bazooka to stop 3 German armored cars in one night. Hidden behind thick greenery, they let each vehicle pass, then struck at its weaker rear armor before disappearing down farm lanes, rearming for the next strike. On Pacific Islands, the weapon proved equally decisive. At Saipan and Iwo Jima, Marines used bazookas not only against light Japanese tanks, but also to blast pillboxes and cave entrances. A well-placed rocket could collapse a fortified position that might otherwise demand hours of artillery fire and heavy casualties. These stories repeated across continents. Small, two-man teams armed with a $25 steel tube changing the course of local fights and saving countless lives. Each ambush, each bunker destroyed, deepened the weapon's legend and taught new tactics that spread through training manuals and word of mouth until every squad understood how to turn terrain, patience, and a single rocket into an overwhelming force. The bazooka's success forced immediate and creative responses from armored forces. The moment infantry could reliably punch holes in tanks, designers and crews looked for ways to survive the new threat. German and Italian units adopted several countermeasures. Crews added spaced armor plates or skirts fitted away from the hull to trigger the shaped charge prematurely and reduce its penetrating effect. Sandbags, logs, and extra track links were lashed onto vulnerable areas. Tank commanders began to keep infantry screens close to teams of riflemen and machine gunners whose job was to clear buildings and hedgerows of hidden bazooka teams before armor advanced. Recon and scouting increased. Tanks moved with greater caution, relying on aerial observation and infantry support to spot ambushes. Tactically, armored units changed how they fought. They avoided predictable routes where ambushes were likely, altered speed and formation to reduce exposure, and used combined arms teams more deliberately. Artillery, mortars, and engineers working to root out infantry anti-tank positions. Crews trained to keep moving and to present their strongest armor toward likely enemy approaches, while supporting vehicles and armored scouts swept flanks. This push and pull created an arms race of economics as much as engineering. For a few dollars per rocket, the Allies could field thousands of bazookas. To blunt them, Axis forces had to add weight, complexity, and cost to their tanks, or change doctrine entirely. The bazooka hadn't just introduced a new weapon. It changed the calculus of battlefield design. Cheap infantry weapons could force expensive, widespread adaptations in armored forces, shifting resources and tactics across entire fronts. Experience on the battlefield drove rapid improvements. The original M1 gave way to the M9 and M9A1, which featured better sights, a safer battery system, and stronger rockets with longer effective range. Later came the M18, built from lightweight aluminum so soldiers could carry more firepower on long marches. Each new version reflected lessons learned in combat, better reliability in rain and cold, faster reloads, and increased armor penetration. The bazooka's influence did not stop at American lines. Axis forces quickly copied the concept. German engineers, impressed by captured launchers, developed the Panzerschreck, essentially an enlarged bazooka with heavier rockets that could pierce the thickest Allied armor. After 1945, the design inspired a family of weapons worldwide, from the Soviet RPG series to countless national copies. Its reach spanned theaters too. In Europe, bazookas cracked bunkers and ambushed panzer columns from Normandy to the Ardennes. In the Pacific, Marines used them to blast Japanese pillboxes and cave defenses where artillery was slow or impossible. And only a few years later, during the Korean War, upgraded super bazookas faced Soviet-built T-34 tanks and fortified hillsides. Even when heavier armor began to exceed its penetration, the launcher remained indispensable against bunkers, trucks, and strongpoints. By the mid-20th century, the bazooka had reshaped how every major army thought about infantry weapons. A tool first proven on Algerian beaches had become a template for shoulder-fired rockets around the world, proof that a simple idea, refined under fire, could permanently alter the balance between foot soldiers and steel giants. Behind every successful bazooka shot stood men who faced terrifying odds. Operating the weapon demanded more than technical skill. It required raw courage. Bazooka teams often had to close within 50 yards of moving tanks, waiting in silence as engines roared closer. One mistake, one snapped twig, or a flash of movement could bring machine gun fire or a shell that ended the mission instantly. The danger wasn't only from the enemy. The bazooka's own backblast could ignite dry brush, choke a foxhole with dust, or betray the team's position to snipers. Early batteries sometimes failed in cold or damp weather, forcing a soldier to stay exposed while swapping parts under fire. Reloading meant stepping out of cover and trusting a partner to work quickly and precisely as enemy rounds cracked overhead. Many stories of heroism came from these tense moments. Infantrymen crawled through rubble, waded across ditches, or held their ground in hedgerows until the perfect angle appeared. Knowing that the survival of an entire platoon might depend on a single well-aimed rocket, some paid with their lives, others returned to their units as quiet legends. These unnamed soldiers proved that the bazooka was far more than a clever invention. It was a weapon whose success rested on human steadiness under fire. Every glowing backblast and armored kill was the product of bravery as much as engineering, a reminder that even the simplest tool becomes extraordinary only in the hands of those willing to risk everything. By the end of World War II, the bazooka had transformed the battlefield. What began as a $25 steel tube rushed to the beaches of Algeria, forcing the world's most powerful armies to rethink armored warfare. German and Japanese planners could no longer trust that tanks alone could break infantry lines. Every village street, hedgerow, and jungle trail became a possible ambush site. Armored columns needed close infantry screens, heavier armor, and new tactics, expensive adaptations triggered by a weapon that a single soldier could carry. The bazooka's influence extended far beyond 1945. Improved super bazookas faced Soviet T-34s in Korea, while its core design inspired generations of shoulder-fired rockets. From the German Panzerschreck to the Soviet RPG and modern anti-tank missiles, more than a weapon, it reshaped doctrine, proving that innovation at the squad level can force strategic change on a global scale. Yet the bazooka's real story is also human. It empowered small teams who combined nerve, skill, and quick thinking to defeat machines that once symbolized invincibility. Their actions on beaches, in hedgerows, and amid Pacific caves demonstrated how ingenuity and courage can overturn assumptions about power. From its secret debut at Operation Torch to its enduring legacy in today's infantry arsenals, the bazooka stands as a reminder that a simple idea, executed with boldness, can change the very nature of war. Which battlefield invention do you think altered modern combat the most? Share your thoughts and join us next time as we explore more hidden turning points of military history.